So, get into the main topic of the show today. Boundaries. Boundaries. Man, they're important. Very important. So, let's paint the picture, right? When we're speaking about boundaries, right? When we're speaking about boundaries, let's look at it like this. Look at yourself as a house, right? You're a house, and with every house, with the majority of houses, you have a front lawn. So let's say you have the house and you have a front lawn. And your front lawn is beautiful. It's real grass, it's not the little turf, it's not artificial. You got the sprinklers to come up and, water it every single morning. That's your lawn, right? But what's the one thing that we need to have in front of that lawn so people don't continue to step on it? You need to have that fence around that line. See that fence? That's the boundary, right? So when we're speaking about boundaries today, let's look at it like that. The boundaries is that fence around your line, right? That fence around your circle, right? And what's going to happen if that fence isn't there? People are going to walk down the street. They just going to step on your line. And if a bunch of people are stepping on your line, what's going to happen? It's going to start to look all bad. You're about to start to have footprints. You're going to have spots to where, it gets trampled and it gets your grass is going to look bad. If everybody's stepping on your line, that's why people don't like other folks stepping on their line, because you're not finna mess up my shit. But when you have that fence, there, nobody's going to step on your line. Nobody's going to step on your line. Nobody's going to come into your house. They are only going to come into your house if you allow them to. They're only going to come into your house. They're only going to step on that line if you allow them to, right? And if you have certain things that you want to keep out, that you want to keep away, that's what that fence is there, right? Because boundaries is keeping the good things in and making sure the bad things stay out. So those bad neighbors or those bad people or that dog up the street that keep, causing mayhem in the hood, you don't want that person coming on your line. That's why you got that fence there. But if you want to invite the good people, if you want to keep the good people in and allow them to feel safe and let them understand, like, hey, my lawn looks good. That's what that fence is there for, right? So let's look at boundaries as a fence, not a wall. It's a big difference, right? A fence, you can open, you can close. You allow people to come in, you kick people out. A boundary is there to protect you, but also a boundary is there to allow the other individual what they can get away with and what they can't get away with. A boundary is there to assist you with understanding that, your self-esteem is high, right? Because a lot of individuals who struggle with boundaries, their self-esteem may not be too high. But with that fence, that boundaries, we can pull things in, we can keep things out, right? But if you just have that wall, if you just have a brick wall, you're keeping everything out, and you're not letting anything in. You're keeping everything out, and you're not letting anything in. And what's going to happen is, you're not going to let in those positive things. You're not going to let in those people that may come around, and that individual may be the one to bring you out of your shit. But because you got that wall built up and right there, you won't even notice. And it's okay. It's okay. That's your loss, right? But we got to understand there's a difference between a boundary and a wall. Do you have a wall up, or do you have a boundary up? Where are you at when it comes to it? So when we're speaking about boundaries, let's look at it from that perspective, right? Let's focus on that. That's the first part. So, what are boundaries? We got into that. Now, there are different types of boundaries, right? There's a lot of different types of boundaries, and it's a lot of reasons why we should put boundaries. So for right now, we're going to focus on some of the boundaries that I believe are important, that I believe, in my personal opinion, are the most important. We got, obviously, the physical boundary. We got the emotional boundary, and then we got functional boundaries, right? So getting into what all of those means. Physical boundaries, we know what that is. Don't come into my space, right? Don't touch me. Some people who don't like being touched, they're gonna tell you, don't touch me. Certain individuals who like, their space and their bubble, don't do that. Certain people who don't really like loud noises. Loud noises is a physical boundary. Let's not do that. Are you that person that gets annoyed when somebody is just loud? Because I know I do. I get very, very annoyed when somebody gets loud. I get very, very annoyed when somebody touches me. And even with myself, I have to understand that sometimes I can't be touching everybody. Not as if like I'm touching people in the wrong way, but I'm a very touchy-feely person. Like, I like hugs. I like to allow the other person to know that I'm there. I'm going to console them. I'm going to hold them. I'm going to do these things. But everybody's not there. Everybody don't like you touching on them. That's not to say I'm walking around touching on asses and things like that. No, but it's we have to be mindful of where we're at, right? When it comes to certain physical boundaries. Are you the individual that is kind of touchy-feely? And if that other individual isn't, you have to respect that, right? You have to respect it, because when it comes to respect, a big thing about respect is understanding how to say no, but also understanding how to receive that no, right? Because a lot of us can say no, but when it comes to hearing no, we have issues like, oh no, you don't like me and all this extra shit and blah blah blah. Whoa whoa whoa. No, you have to be that boundary that you're setting, right? So if you're that individual who don't like certain things, you have to let it be known at that point. I don't like to be touched. So that's when it comes to physical boundaries, right? That's what it is. Now, emotional boundaries. Emotional boundaries are things that I believe are a little bit harder to keep, right? A lot of physical boundaries are clear. It's simple. It's like, don't touch me, and that's that. Keep it at that. Emotional boundaries, they're much harder. They're hard to see. They're hard to notice. And just with any boundary, whether it's physical, emotional, or functional, we don't know that boundary is there until it is crossed. We don't know that we dislike something until we dislike something, right? So when it comes to emotional boundaries deals with how do you allow people to make you feel? How do you allow people to control you and control your day, control your feelings, your thoughts, your emotions, all of those things, right? If I can step into a room and say, hey, fuck all y'all, and say all of these things and say all these negative things, and you can allow me to ruin your whole entire day. Why am I stuck on the fact that this one person said this? Let's be mindful of how we allow, because that's another thing. It's hard to say and it's hard to understand certain times, but we allow ourselves to get wrapped up in what other people say. We allow ourselves to get wrapped up in thinking that we know how the other person feels about us, when in reality, the grand scheme of things, people don't really give a fuck about us like that. Not. So if a person is having a bad day and if a person is doing anything negative, understand it's not a shot to you, but if you allow that individual to control everything that's going on in your world, let's look at the boundaries that we have on each other, right? Also, another thing when it comes to emotional boundaries, you allow certain people. No, you don't allow certain people. You allow yourself, whether it's your plans, your dreams, whatever. You are okay with all of those things being sacrificed for the fact of the next person. Oh, whoop-de-whoop needs this. Okay, so I don't mind putting myself or digging myself in a hole. I don't mind going in debt for this because whoop-de-whoop needs this. Like, nah. That's the line that you have allowed that individual to cross, right? Because we got to understand, man, not taking responsibility for yourself and blaming others for your problems, that's a big thing. So when it comes to emotional boundaries, we have to understand, how do we allow ourselves? Do we give too much of ourselves up to someone else? Do we give too much of our thoughts up to someone else? And do we allow the other person to dig into us too much, right? Because when we come across situations to where we immediately tell the next person everything, when we immediately tell the next person everything, we That's a boundary, right? Our boundaries are too loose. Our boundaries are entirely too loose. When we go into a situation and we just tell that person everything and we just trust that person automatically, you don't want to get in the habit of trusting everybody with everything. That's how you're going to get hurt, right? You want to let the person in. I'm not saying no, fuck, trust no one and blah, blah, blah. No. What I'm saying is you want to test people. You want to let them come in slowly. You want to spoon feed them. You want to see where they're at, right? See if they're good enough to be a part of your life, because it's the other thing. They are coming in to be a part of your life. You're not going to be a part of their life. Let's take that approach, because we got to protect ourselves when it comes to a lot of things, right? So that's emotional boundary. That's emotional boundaries. Now, when it comes to functional boundaries, I believe are very, very easy to understand, and functional boundaries are boundaries that allow us to reach a certain goal or allow us to reach something, right? So an example of a functional boundary is, I am not the type of individual to be late to work, so I'm not going to allow you to make me late to work. You get what I'm saying? But there are some individuals who always allow such and such to make them late to work, so your boundaries when it comes to how you're able to function, how you're able to work, how you're able to move around in society, those can either be good or bad. When you're at work, do you constantly take on the jobs of your coworkers? Do you allow your boss to trample over who you are? Do you allow your boss to say any and everything to you? If you do, we should work on that. If we don't, then okay, cool. Cool. Keep it at that, right? So when it comes to those boundaries, understand this, and that's what we're going to primarily talk about right now. Physical boundaries, emotional boundaries, functional boundaries, those types of things. But why are they crossed, right? Why are my boundaries crossed all the time? Why are they so hard to maintain? First and foremost, a lot of people may have boundaries. No. First and foremost, a lot of people don't even know that they have boundaries, right? A lot of people don't know what their boundaries are. As I said earlier a few minutes ago, you're not going to know what your boundaries are until they are crossed. You're not going to know what your boundaries are until they're crossed. But once they're crossed, what are you going to do? That's the big thing, right? Are you going to speak about it at that moment, or are you going to be like, let me, get over it. Let me just throw it in the back pocket, right? So one of the reasons why a lot of boundaries are crossed is because, one, we don't even know that is a boundary. That's the first thing. Second thing is that we don't speak up for ourselves when it comes to situations, right? We don't speak up for ourselves when it comes to situations. Like me, one of my biggest boundaries, one of my biggest pet peeves, and it's going to sound very, very funny, very, very funny, but my biggest physical boundary, I have two physical boundaries, but my biggest physical boundaries: do not touch my ass. That's my biggest physical boundary. Do not do that. I don't care who you are. I don't care how much I love you. I don't care what it is. Don't do that. Period. Right? I don't know when I came up with that physical boundary. I don't know how that physical boundary came into the world or whatever. But that's what it is for me. And if you do that, it is going to fuck me up. Right? Especially if I know you did it on purpose. Like, and that's the thing. Like, I don't care who you are. You can be a male or a female. Ain't having it. Don't do it. So when that happens, what I do is I shut it down real quick. Like, hey, buddy, look, don't do that no more. Period. You got to let it be known. Another physical boundary that I have that I don't like is, like, I'm an extremely ticklish individual. Like, I am ticklish to the point to where, like, if you just, like, poke me, I'm a hee. Like, that's me. Don't tickle me. Don't. Because what's going to happen is I apologize in advance if you were to get punched in the face. I apologize in advance if you were to get slapped. I apologize in advance if you were to just get pushed and thrown somewhere else. Why? Because when I get tickled, I just move. Like, it's just my reaction. Like, I'm trying to protect myself, and it's like, it's crazy because even though we're laughing when we're being tickled is nowhere near being tickled is nowhere near funny. Even though we laugh when we're tickled, being tickled is not funny. So please don't tickle me, because the consequence is you may get pushed or harmed or something. Not like I'm gonna beat you up, but just my reaction is gonna be like, boom, go. Right? So those are some of my physical boundaries that I will not allow certain people to cross. Right? And the way I don't allow people to cross those is I speak about it at that moment. What we have to understand is the word no is a complete sentence. The word no is a complete sentence. So that means when you say no, leave it at that. Leave it at that. What boundaries are there to do, they're intended to protect your happiness. You don't need to explain to anybody why you need to stay happy. You don't need to explain your boundaries to anybody. You don't need to explain why and all this other stuff. So when certain boundaries are crossed, say no. Stand firm on what you're talking about. Say no and leave it at that. Once you start to open up and explain what that other person is doing, they're trying to figure out how can they cross it. You know, it's like if someone's crossing that fence and they're talking to you, right? They're telling you all of these things and they're distracting you and all this other stuff. Next thing you know, they done hopped over your fence. Next thing you know, they're gonna cross through it or manage to unlock it or whatever. No. Leave it at what it is. You got to stand firm on it. And stand firm on it. Say no. Just don't explain yourself. You don't have to. You do not. Please understand this. You do not have to give an explanation for why you need to be happy. Say that again. You do not have to give an explanation for your happiness. You do not have to give an explanation for your happiness. You do not have to give an explanation for protecting your happiness. You do not have to give an explanation for none of that. So when it comes to boundaries and when it comes to protecting those things, to enforcing or maintaining enforcing and maintaining those boundaries, we have to understand, be confident in our boundaries and just say no and let it be at that, right? Another thing when it comes to enforcing and maintaining boundaries is that we have to understand that when it comes to boundaries, we have to make ourselves a priority. We have to make ourselves a priority, right? I'm doing this for me. Just like that lawn that you have in your house, you don't want your lawn to look like shit. So you're doing it for yourself. You're doing it for yourself first. And boundaries and being selfish, a lot of people view them as negative things. It's just, oh, you're trying to keep me away from you and blah, blah, blah. Oh, you selfish. You ain't this and whoop. Those individuals who are mad and who are crying and coming up with all of these reasons as to why, you should not, enforce. You should feel bad about your boundaries and you should feel bad about, being selfish and things like that. Those are the individuals you need to be wary of. Those are the individuals you need to be careful of, because they're trying to creep into your space. They're trying to get into your household and just tell you all of these or do some bad stuff to you. So you got to be careful, right? Don't feel bad about the boundaries. Don't feel bad about being selfish when it comes to your boundaries. This is your shit. It's all about protecting yourself when it comes to enforcing and maintaining a lot of these boundaries. Another thing when it comes to boundaries, expect friction. Expect people to disagree with your boundary, because what's going to happen is in a lot of situations, granted, even though a boundary was crossed before, that does not mean that boundary can't be reinforced. Even though a boundary was crossed before, that does not mean that boundary can't not reinforced but enforced, right? You can always start over with a boundary. You can always create a new boundary. Now, is it going to be harder to create or to enforce a new boundary if that person has been crossing that boundary for years? Hell yeah. Those are the hardest boundaries to create, because that other person is looking like, man, I've been doing this and I've been doing this. Whoop. You changing. You different. You this and that and all these other things. But the thing is, yes, you damn right I'm changing. You damn right I'm changing. Really changing. I'm changing for the betterment of myself. I'm changing so I can be good. And if that means I have to change and be good for myself, and then you feel a certain way, my bad. I'm sorry. Because when it comes to responsibility, I am not responsible for how you feel. I'm not responsible for how you feel. I am not responsible for how you feel. I am only responsible for how I treat you. And I am only responsible for how I treat myself. See, when it comes to responsibility is understanding what's our job and what's not our job. Just like those functional boundaries. If I was to go ask, I'm a social worker, and a lot of the nurses, sometimes they be having to clean up shit. If one of the nurses come in and be like, hey, Willis, do you mind helping me out with cleaning this shit? No, not happening. Not at all. Why, Willis? Because it's not in my job description. That's not what I do. That's not what I'm here for. What's in your job description of life? What is in your job description of life? And how are you not going to allow other people to overstep that? How are you not going to get away from that? How is that going to happen? Right? So when it comes to a lot of the things, when it comes to establishing and enforcing boundaries and things like that, understand that there is going to be friction. There is going to be pushback. But that pushback is warranted. That pushback is supposed to happen. Because it's like, I can't do what I used to do anymore, so people are going to get mad. But that's okay. When that person is pushing back, what are you supposed to do? Stand firm. Stand on your guard. Right? Have confidence in that no. Believe in that no. Have faith in that no. Don't tolerate it. Because you have to make yourself a priority. You have to put yourself first. You have to do all of these things for the sake of self. And if you're not doing that, you're going to see yourself in a bunch of, negative places. You're going to see yourself in a bunch of negative places, whether it's negative relationship with friends, negative relationships with significant others, abusive relationships, toxic relationships. See, all of these relationships, they get toxic because the boundaries aren't there. That person done trampled all over your lawn. That person done made their lawn, your lawn, their home. And now you have to figure out, how can I fix this? And it's hard to fix it, but it's not impossible. It's not impossible at all. So let me step into the comments real quick. That's hella true. You will shoot a nigga when you getting tickled. Hell yeah, Keith, you right. I don't care who you are. Just don't tickle me. Like, that's all I ask. Please don't tickle me and don't touch my ass. That is not cool. Didier, what's the deal? A lack of boundaries invites a lack of respect. Oh, my man. Shouts out to you. Let me hold on. I got something for you, Didier. Yes, my man. You stated a lack of boundaries invites a lack of respect. Hell fucking yeah, a lack of boundaries invites a lack of respect, right? I know what I could do to you. I know how to walk over you now, right? I know how to treat you, right? I know what I can get away with, and I know what I can't get away with. So if I can get away with murder with you, what does that say about you? What does that say about you? Now, looking at a lot of situations to where there may be toxic relationships. Let's say you're in a very abusive relationship, and that husband or that wife, because there are abusive women out here who really be knocking heads off, that husband or that wife who is abusing their significant other, understand that, we're being abused, you're getting abused, but you're allowing that abuse because you don't think you're worthy of anything greater. That's where that lack of respect comes in. You're right. So boundaries that are too loose invites a lack of respect. So you're extremely big. Didier, you teach them how to treat you by what you Oh, you teach them how to treat you by what you allow, what you reinforce, and what you stand for. Oh yeah, facts. Another reason why, and I'm glad you said this, Didier out here stating facts today, man. Bravo to you. But another reason why it's hard to maintain, enforce, and establish boundaries is because a lot of the boundaries that we're trying to establish, they're inconsistent. One day, I don't want you to tickle me. The next day, I'm cool being tickled. The next day, I don't want you to tickle me. The next day, I'm cool with being tickled. Yo, you about to have me hot, so I'm finna be like, fuck it. I'm going to do what I want to do. Period. I'm going to do what I want to do, regardless, because it's inconsistent. You're not following through on your word. And it's like, we know what we don't want. We know how we're supposed to behave in a lot of situations, but we're not following through on our word. And that's the biggest part when it comes to a lot of our boundaries, right? When it comes to a lot of our boundaries, and it always, boundaries and anything in life always goes back to self. How do you feel about self? How are you going to allow yourself to be trampled over? Do you think you're worthy of this? Are you not worthy of this? Where are you going to go with this? So when it comes to boundaries, understand that it's about self. So when it comes to enforcing boundaries, you have to say no. Stand on your toes. Be firm in that no. Also understand what's your limits and voice your limits from the gate. Understand what's your limits and voice your limits from the gate, and then don't be ashamed of your limits, right? Because what boundaries are going to do, boundaries are going to allow that other person to understand what they can get away with and what they can't get away with. A kid is going to act a fool if he knows that he can be a fool in your presence. Period. If that kid doesn't know he can be a fool, if that kid knows that I can't be around y'all because if I'm being around y'all, my mom find out and get my ass beat when I get back home, I ain't rocking with y'all because I ain't trying to get beat with that stick. Like, I got beat with sticks before and oxygen tools and back scratches and all this other stuff. Because of that shit, I know what I can and can't do as a child. Well, I knew what I could and couldn't do as a child, obviously. And this is with people. We're going to test another person's boundaries. We're going to test that other person's boundaries. Facts. I'm going to see what I can get away with. So, if you don't allow me to do this today, okay, cool. Give me a week. I'm going to try it again in a week. I'm going to try it again in a month. But it's on you to remember that boundary. It's on you to consistently reinforce that boundary. Because boundaries have to be important to you. That other person doesn't. The other person don't have to respect your boundary. That other person does not have to respect your boundary. You have to respect it. They are only going to respect it if you respect it. They are only going to be cool with it if you're cool with it. If you show them what you want, they have to conform to it. Period. Why? Because if that person is genuinely there for you, they're going to be cool with your boundaries. They're going to be okay with those boundaries, and they're going to respect those boundaries. They're not going to be mad at the fact that you're placing boundaries. But if that person doesn't really care for you like that, oh, nah, you doing too much and you changing and whoop, 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 and all these other things. So when it comes to enforcing these boundaries, when it comes to maintaining these boundaries, when it comes to enforcing and maintaining these boundaries, saying no, stating your limits, being consistent, very consistent. And another part is understanding that when that boundary is crossed, you have to be prepared to dish out some type of consequence. If you don't dish out any type of consequence, that person is like, okay, cool, I know what I can do. I'm gonna cross it over and over and over again. Facts. You're not gonna put your hand on that stove when it's on because you know you're gonna get burned. You're not gonna continue to do whoopty whoop because you know whoopty whoop is gonna beat you up. You know, people are only gonna do what we allow them to do. So when those boundaries are crossed, what consequence are you going to put up? What consequence are you going to dish out? Does that consequence have to be crazy and loud and ridiculous? No. Don't be extra with your consequence. Don't be like, oh, you crossed my boundary, so I'm gonna fuck you up. And whoa, 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 whoa. That's extra. However, if that boundary is crossed, let's say, for example, you have a boundary of, let's say, for example, you have a boundary, a physical boundary of you not being touched. No, let's say this. Let's go the functional route, right? Let's say if you have a boundary of you're not the individual that's going to take in all of the work from other people, but you have coworkers who consistently, yo, can you do this? Yo, can you do this? Yo, can you do this? You have to say no, 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 no. And if people keep asking you, you may have to remind them, yo, I am a social worker. I am a therapist. This is what I do. I do not do that. So may you please stop asking. Thank you. That's a consequence because you have to let that person know. You have to put that person in check. Like, yo, quit asking me about this. Are they going to stop? Yep. They're going to stop. Let's speak about it when it comes to emotional boundaries, right? An example of an emotional boundary is, let's say, trying to think of one, a good one, because an emotional boundary deals with our feelings and thoughts and things like that. Okay, cool. Let's say this. You have an emotional boundary of when people come around, you don't allow them to really disrupt your peace by telling you negative things, right? You don't allow negative vibes or negative stuff into your house, right? Because those emotional boundaries can screw you up, right? So if anybody is coming barking at you with a bunch of negative stuff, that in turn can cause you to start to be negative, start to think negative, right? We want to stay on this high vibration. We want to stay peaceful. We want to stay as good as we possibly could, you know? So if you have an emotional boundary of, you know, you don't want people to come talk to you about negative stuff. You don't want gossip. You don't want to gossip and bring all of that stuff in. Let the consequence be known. I don't like this. Do not come to my house expecting to speak about a bunch of negative stuff. Do not come to my house expecting to, you know, run your mouth and talk about Johnny up the block because Johnny done cheated on Sabrina with Catherine and all this other stuff. I'm not here for that. Let that boundary be known. Put that person on blast. Put that person in check. Do you have to be an asshole about it? No. Do not go ahead and be like, oh, we'll fuck you and blah, 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 blah. Nah. Politely say, hey, this is what I don't like, and this is what I will not tolerate. And if this is what you cross, if this is the boundary that you cross, this is what's going to happen. So, you got saying no, stating your limits, how far you won't go, and things like that. You got being consistent. You got, what was the one I just talking about? Being consistent. Those consequences. Understanding that you have to give consequences when those boundaries are crossed. And another part, and this is probably should have been number one. Now, hold on a second. I feel like I need some of my water. Hold on one quick second. I gotta dry my mouth. Anyway, I'm back. But another part of it is be assertive, not aggressive. Big difference. Be assertive, not aggressive. Once again, we have to work at being assertive, not aggressive, right? The main difference between being assertive and being aggressive is we understand that when it comes to being assertive, you're standing up for yourself. That's what being assertive is. When you're being aggressive, you're standing against something or someone else. It's a huge difference. When you're being assertive, you're keeping yourself first. I don't like this. I don't like that. I won't allow this to happen. I refuse to allow this to happen. That's what it's going to be when it comes to being assertive. But when it comes to being aggressive, like I said, you're standing against something. You know, you're willing to fight. You're willing to give all of it for it. I don't like this. Go woo 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 woo, blah 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 blah. You're too emotionally tied into what you're stating you don't like. So when it comes to placing those boundaries and enforcing those boundaries, be assertive. One of the easiest ways to be assertive is just give I statements. First of all, you can just say no. And if they're going to keep asking why, and if you feel inclined to explain your no, just say no. I don't like this because of XYZ, and leave it at that. Don't be like, no, I don't like this because whoop 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 and blah 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 and nah. No. I don't like this because of how this makes me feel. I don't like it when you do this because this makes me feel I'm not worthy. I don't like it when you touch me because I don't like it when you touch me because I just get weird. My anxiety starts to go up. I'm not comfortable with doing your workload because I don't know it. And if I do it wrong, I'm going to get in trouble. What are you comfortable with? What are you not comfortable with? And if you're not comfortable with something, put that out there. But understand, when you put that out there, there's going to be that constant feedback, that constant pushback. But that's okay. That's what's supposed to happen. Right? Especially when you're doing something that is going against what that other person expects of you. When you're doing something that's going against what that other person expects of you, they're going to push you back. They're going to do what they can do to try to get back to their own state, if that's the word, right word, whatever. But they're going to do what they got to do for the sake of themselves, period. Takers are going to take and givers are going to give. But the one thing is that, we have to understand where we're at in a lot of situations. How are we not going to allow people to step on our line? And that's the basis when it comes to all of this, with me speaking about boundaries. Don't let people step on your line. Because you don't want to have to fix your line. When it comes to that line and that line gets stepped on, who has to clean it up? You. Who has to water it and mow the grass and trim it and all the other stuff? You. When somebody comes onto your lawn and comes into your house and trash it and messes up, who is in charge of cleaning it up? You. Save yourself the pain. Save yourself the trouble. Save yourself the peace. Well, not peace. Keep the peace. But save yourself the time. And just don't let nobody trample on your line. Don't let anybody cross those boundaries. And granted, it's like I said earlier, there's a lot of boundaries that we don't know that we have. Right? There's a lot of boundaries that we don't know that we have. Going back to this analogy of, a line and boundaries, if there's not a line or if there's not a gate or a fence that separates my yard from my neighbor's yard, I'm not going to know how far I can go. I'm not going to know how far I can't go. But you're going to know when that person has went too far. And when that person has went too far, say no, be assertive, maintain your limits, and understand if that person does give you some form of pushback, hit them with some type of consequence. And if that consequence means that I have to delete you out of my life for X amount of time so you can understand that I am not playing with your ass, do what you got to do for the sake of yourself, for yourself, and by yourself. And always keep yourself first. Ain't nothing wrong with that. So, when it comes to boundaries, and I always like to leave everyone off with a question, right? And one of the questions that I came up with, when it comes to this aspect of boundaries, are your boundaries too loose? And are your boundaries too wide? No. Scratch that. Are you working with boundaries or are you working with a wall? Do you have a boundary set up with other people or do you have a wall set up with other people? Because we got to understand the difference between a boundary and a wall. As I stated earlier, the wall is going to keep things out and it's going to keep things in. The boundary allows for people to move, allows for people to understand how far I can go and how far I can't go. With the wall, you're not going to be able to see or accept any good that may come your way. With a boundary, you're going to be able to see what's positive. you're going to be able to see the good people and the good things and who they are. So are you working with the wall, or are you working with the boundary? And if you're working with the wall, understand it's okay. Perfectly fine. Acknowledge it, identify it, and work at yourself tearing that wall down, because a lot of us feel as if my wall is up, so that it's that next person's responsibility to knock our wall down. I don't believe in that. You put that wall up. And I'm sorry that wall is up because whoop-de-whoop from the past did this. But just because that wall is up, that doesn't mean you have to keep me outside. That doesn't mean you have to, not let all this goodness in. And I understand that, that wall protects you. I understand that wall allows you to not get hurt. But that wall is also going to allow you to stay. That wall is also going to keep you staying guilty. That wall is always going to keep you staying angry. That wall is going to keep that resentment in. That wall is going to keep that guilt in. See, what those boundaries are going to do is that guilt and that resentment and that pain that's going to be able to come out of your system. And anything that comes after that, all of that positive stuff is going to be able to come in. And you're going to understand how to not let certain things out, and how to keep certain things in. So, question of the day, please understand this. Are you working with the wall, or are you working with the boundary? Thank you. Thank you for everyone that's tuning in. Thank you, Keith, for tuning in. Thank you to my man Didier for tuning in, man. Thank you to everyone that's listening. Thank you to those individuals who have listened from the gate. Thank you to those individuals who listened and came in midway. Thank you to those individuals who ain't gonna listen at all because you haven't caught on yet. You will catch on eventually. So, as always, man, I'm Willis Cooks. Thank you for listening. And understand this, ain't no wealth without your mental health. So please stay blessed and take care of yourself. Be great, y'all. Peace.